What were once fringe conspiracy theories are now being shared to millions. I'm Mariana Spring, and I've been investigating social media influencers who spread misinformation, including disgraced nurse Kate Shemirani.
Is it the cancer that's killing these patients, or is it the treatment?
I hope I'm responsible for my sister's death.
And so they ran this programme. I believe they've run it everywhere. All of a sudden, all over the place, I was being called a murderer and had many death threats. So they were given allopurinol, which you don't give with the respiratory. They were giving her acyclovir, the Fragmin, the prednisolone, omeprazole. Because I went, Paloma, have you made your mind up? Are you doing chemotherapy? She went, no, I've not made my mind up yet. I said, wait a minute. I said, do you know what these drugs are? She said, well, I thought they were painkillers and my steroid. And then the doctor said, who's bringing you back in a couple of weeks for your chemotherapy? And Paloma said, well, I've not decided if I'm having chemotherapy. And Dr. Arunadaya Mohan said, but you've already started. She said she was afraid of them. She was afraid they weren't going to let her out. She said, I can't breathe. And then her eyes rolled back and saliva came out of her mouth. Now, with what's happened to my daughter, with her death, we have uncovered something that is so sinister. It's so horrific that COVID just pales into comparison.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Resistance GB podcast on the way back from Sounds Beautiful Festival. My name's Will Coleshill, at Will Coleshill on X. Today I'm joined by Kate Shemirani, who was speaking at Sounds Beautiful but wasn't able to make it there in person. Kate, do you want to explain what has led you to be stuck here at home for the moment?
I'm not really stuck at home, but I am the guardian of several very old cats and 2 dogs, as you know. And as I'd had so many death threats because of panodrama and someone on my property, I wasn't prepared to leave my house unattended, especially when it was advertised that I was going to be there. So that was the only reason. Not because I have any, it's just a property, but I do care for my pets and my daughter, and so yeah, that's why I didn't go.
Do you want to explain for those of the viewers who haven't seen it, what were the events that have led to these death threats and whatever else? And you can explain whatever else.
Well, my daughter's died and her inquest is coming up. So Panorama aired a programme which of course could be, well, absolutely is perverting the course of justice. And so they ran a completely fantasy programme. They didn't show any evidence, insinuating, actually they were downright accusing me of stopping our daughter from choosing allopathic modern oncology treatment. And of course that was completely fictitious, it was untrue.
A young woman has lost her life unnecessarily. And the thought that she was persuaded that alternative treatment could help her, I find it really hard to understand.
And so they ran this programme and they ran it on iPlayer, they ran it in the newspapers, I believe they've run it everywhere. And so all of a sudden, all over the place, I was being called a murderer and had many death threats. But of course, I've been here before with Panorama and their lies and the way the media spin it. So I think that had led up to it. Trust me, I'm not afraid of any of that nonsense, but I think it's very telling of how the media can whip people up to act in a way that is unlawful. And I think people should take that on and think that's quite interesting, because look what could happen. Just to say, because I would like to get this in, I did speak to Dave Cartland on Sunday, and he was very quiet and subdued about what had been happening to him in the press. And then I read the next day that his wife had found him unresponsive on the floor, and he couldn't take any more because of the press. and he'd ended up in the hospital via the air ambulance, which I think is incredible, the power of the press, and I'm quite hardcore, but it will drive people to harm themselves.
This podcast is proudly supported by the Wellness Way Festival with Barbara O'Neill. The doctor of your future is you. For more info, check out thewellnesswayfestival.com. Do you want to give a bit of background as to why they might have targeted you?
In 2020, I was the health expert on local radio in the town where we are, and I would go on and cover a particular topic. And in the December, it had been Ebola. Ebola, we're all going to die of Ebola. And I did Ebola on there. And then they were talking about COVID-19. So in the February show, I went on and I'd researched about Wuhan being the test city for 5G. Wuhan in the autumn of December 2019, it was the test city for 5G. And I talked about this. Then I talked about China had mandated its vaccines for the population of December 2019, and everybody had had the flu shot, which was 4 untested influenzas, and highly pathogenic, highly disease-causing H1N1. So I talked about that, and then I talked about how we couldn't always trust doctors, and I referred to Harold Shipman, although I kind of retract that now because you can throw Harold Shipman and Beverly Allick in the Lucy Letby file drawer. People really do need to go and look at that again. That's based on a journalist, and a statistician told me to rethink that one, so I'm still researching all of that. So either side, don't, take me on for either of it. Anyway, I did this show, and I would always get about 5,000 views on Facebook, and I went to the cinema, and I came out of the cinema and it got 50,000 views. And then I got a little bit concerned. And then the next day it was 250,000 views, and then I was concerned, very concerned, because I knew I was in trouble. And then within 2 days it had a couple of million views, and I was kicked off the radio. The radio station was threatened by Ofcom to remove all of my shows, a couple of years worth of shows. They had to all be erased. And then I was put onto the local Facebook group, and I was the enemy of the town. And they then started to talk about it. I thought, oh dear, well, I may as well go really loud now, and then they won't be able to touch me. So I then started I said they're going to come with a vaccine. I said that in the radio show. I said they will come for a vaccine and you won't be able to travel without it in February 2020. And that's exactly what they did. So that was how, and then I got asked to be MC at the rallies. So I did. And I used to do a newsreel every day on Facebook. Every day I did a newsreel during lockdown. So that kind of did it. So I got arrested, de-arrested, arrested again, custody for 32 hours. They came to my house. They had a court case for a week. I didn't go. Why would I? And then I was found guilty, even for things I didn't organise. And I was given a conviction. I don't know what it was. And then I was given 3 fines, 600, 600, 600. And 3 court costs, which was 180 quid, which is, of course, 3 sixes again. And I had my licence to practice as a nurse taken away from me. I'd just like to add at that point, who would want to be with the NMC taken over by the government in 2001? As far as I'm concerned, in my personal opinion, and I've told them that, they're a terrorist organisation. And I demanded all my money back under the 2006 Terrorism Act. Outrageous. Because they did. They terrorised their own nurses to have a shot.
Do you want to give some of your credentials as a nurse?
Oh, yes. So I was, I first trained as a nurse in 1984. I was enrolled, then registered later. I did the conversion. I also was a trained and qualified independent nurse prescriber. I worked in gynaecology, theatres, mentally handicapped. I worked in NHS Direct. I was one of the inaugural nurses there when it was first started. I worked in busy staying in Europe. I worked in a private hospital. So I had a plethora of experience in all different areas of nursing. Then I ran an aesthetics business. I had a diploma in personal nutrition. And yeah. So.
And that's why they wanted you for the radio show, because you had this expertise.
I was doing a lecture And I wanted it advertised, so I asked could I go on there and advertise my lecture, and then they came to me and said, would you like to come on and be our health expert? So I was great till I wasn't.
You're great until you questioned everything.
Yes. So he got the sack as well, the guy who was with me. He'd been on there for years. They got rid of him as well. Around about 2012, I was diagnosed with cancer. And that ended everything for me. I realised that everything I've been taught was rubbish. It literally is. It's an inversion of the truth, all of it. Everything they tell you that they do, that you need to do, is an inversion of what you really need to do. It's the opposite. So I stopped vaccinating my children, stopped vaccinating my pets. I just completely changed everything. A true informed consent. And I wouldn't do it to anyone else either.
And so they've been attacking you for a few years. Do you want to highlight, apart from putting you on trial, there have been hit pieces against you? And
there has.
What else?
Panodrama. Putting me in... I just found out, actually, last week, that there was a bill going through Parliament. The title of nurse, if you're a nurse, you're trained and qualified. Nursery nurse, nursing mother, veterinary nurse. You die as a trained and qualified nurse. Registered nurse is protected by Parliament. So you have to be on the nursing register if you want to work as a nurse. So I'm still a nurse, trained and qualified. And I call myself natural nurse in a toxic world. I haven't broken any laws. I've never lied. I've never said I'm registered. I'm not. I wouldn't want to be. But they went through Parliament with a bill, and they talked about some guy, Lee, someone who managed to fake his way into a ward and pretend he was a nurse. I've never done that. When it passed its first hearing, they went in for the second one, and then they stopped mentioning him, and all through, and it's on Hansard is my name. And they said, you know, because I'm anti-vax, so what? Does it not say in the Code of Conduct about not breaking the law? So surely to give an untested, unlicensed, uninsured experimental vaccine that they don't know what's in it themselves, how can they then get a true informed consent off someone? Is that not breaking the law? So, they were trying to pass a bill retrospectively to jail people who call themselves nurse. So it was almost like they were trying to pass a bill just for me.
And they had your name all through the discussions.
Hansard. So I have just done a letter to Parliament and for this particular MP, because it's an abuse of power. It's a total abuse of power again. It's a witch hunt.
And you were the witch?
Yes.
So...
And not ding dong, the witch is dead yet either. Yeah, so that was last week as well. Outrageous abuse of power. What are they afraid of?
And retrospective law, by the way, would mean that something that you did that, even by their dictats, they considered to be
5 years ago,
legal,
absolutely.
They can then punish you for that,
And
even though they
jail.
said it was fine at the time.
It was jail and a level 4 fine.
And this is the sort of thing that you see in basket case banana republics.
That is what... it's all there. You can find it. It's all online. You can find it. Anyway, they pulled it at the last minute. I'd like to think some lawyer went, that's so illegal, because it was crazy. But that's okay, because, you know, I don't need to even use the word title. If they are going to hang on to that title with such appalling behaviour and abuse of power, why would I ever want to be associated with that? Why would anybody? Never.
I would disagree. I would say I don't believe it's up to the government to define words.
Absolutely, it's not. But this was the Nursing Times. They were all delighting in it. You know, announcing it's going to pass, it's going to go through. You know, this is the nurses that came to me that were being coerced to take this injection and came to me for help.
How many?
Lots, and a lot of them joined Workers for England.
A few, a dozen, dozens?
Dozens and dozens. And even now, I've got nurses coming to me now.
Over 100, maybe?
Yes. One nurse, student nurse, came to me afterwards and wept. And she told me that she'd gone to work on her first ward, and they called it a COVID ward, it was a urology ward, and she was ordered that she mustn't give the patients anything to eat or drink, even if they begged. And they...
So nil by mouth,
Yes.
starving them,
and
dehydrating them.
All she was allowed to do was hold their hand. And she said one elderly lady was begging for a drink, and the senior nurse came in and clicked her finger to get the nurse out. And that lady then died shortly afterwards, by the next day. And they were all given morphine, midazolam. And I said to this young girl, what do you think was happening there? Why do you think that she just did this to get you out? And she said, I don't know. And I said, it's because she didn't want the patient to identify her voice. That's why. So right there, in a ward in Red Hill, crimes were committed.
And that's just one nurse, one example, one hospital.
That's one example. She left nursing. She was a student. But so, you see, even in their code of professional conduct, even end-of-life care, it states, even in the GMC code, you have to address hydration. It doesn't prolong life to give a patient fluids. You can give them IV or you can give it subcutaneous. But to die of dehydration is horrific and it's terribly painful. They can't say, I was told to do it. I was told to do things in my life, but I didn't.
Just following orders.
Yeah. And this is why, well, I just did it. I've kept my head down. I don't want to get into trouble. Well, don't worry, because when the rest of us are shouting about the trouble are gone, there's nobody going to be shouting for you. And you're going to be easy pickings.
I met a girl the other day and she said that she worked as a receptionist in one of the jab centres. And I turned around and I asked her, given everything that was publicly available, given all of the people protesting, how could you contribute to that? Booking people in to have them injured, killed, poisoned.
It's money.
And
they paid a lot of money.
It was like she just didn't get it. She was dead behind the eyes.
I read a group of texts that a pharmacy assistant showed me because she was so horrified. They were told not to tell people. One of the pharmacists died. They were told not to tell people. She was desperately ill after she had her shots, and then one of the pharmacists said that she'd managed to pay her, she'd paid a massive chunk off her mortgage with it. She'd made, I think it was something like £1,800 one day. One
day?
Yeah, at the vaccine centre, they were getting over £300. One group of nurses up at the Queen's Medical Centre in Nottingham, a group of midwives, even though they wouldn't allow their own children to have the shots, and they hadn't had it themselves, they were working in the vaccine clinic to make extra money for Christmas. Where's another story? I mean, these are just incredible. They're incredible, incredible stories of what people will do. Another group of nurses from Boston, up in Lincolnshire, the doctors in their practice were telling them to get more shots out of a vial. So they were telling them to titrate it, to water it down, so that they could get 4 instead of 2, which is great for the patient because they're going to get less of a dose. But they were also told safe administration of medicines as well, and vaccination technique. When you draw up out of a vial, you would put the same amount of air into the vial first if there's more than one dose, so that you can draw up that amount. So if you were taking, let's say you were taking 0.2 mils out, you'd put 0.2 mils of air in, you draw up.
And that's so you don't get a bubble?
Well, no, that's to make it easier out of the vial.
Yeah.
But when you've got your liquid in your syringe, you want the liquid to go all the way up, and then in the hub of the needle, that's another area. And then you basically wait until you see a little bubble of fluid on the end of the syringe. They were told not to do that, not to prime the needle, which is dangerous. They were also then told when you go in to inject someone...
That's to aspirate, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
no, that's to prime the needle so there's no air in it.
Yeah.
So there's no air in it.
Yeah.
So you're not going into vein, you'd need a considerable amount to cause an air embolism. But when you inject, if you were using a Medi-Wipe, you would wipe and you would let it dry because you don't want the alcohol to go in. But as you go into that, you then draw back, and if you get any blood in the syringe, then you would have to discard that and start again. They were told not to draw back, not to aspirate. That's dangerous. Because they wouldn't waste, they wouldn't get wastage. My point to that is, well, you all know it's wrong. Safe administration of medicines, you all know that's wrong, but you do it. And the thing that a lot of them don't understand is when you break the law, the Nursing and Midwifery Council won't be standing behind you when you're in the stand. The NHS definitely won't be behind you when you're in the stand. The Royal College of Nursing won't be behind you when you're in the stand. No, you'll stand alone as a living man or woman under the law.
So you were exposing these things.
And originally, but of course I've gone full in exposing medical crimes constantly.
And you were an icon to many nurses who...
I'm not sure I'd say icon.
Well, I would say so. If over 100 nurses are coming to you and they're speaking to you rather than anyone else because they believe that they can speak to you because they look up to you.
They come to me now, they're sick. I had a phlebotomist tell me that one of the surgeons who was working out of the London clinic was making 9,000 a day extra for the vaccine damaged people who would go to the NHS and they couldn't get anything, so he would see them privately. They couldn't get much more there either. 9,000 a day on top of his salary. Criminal.
And that's why they're going after you, because they want to cover up all of this.
No, I think what's happening now, originally, I know for a fact a lot of people didn't take the shots because I was shouting, but a lot of people were out shouting. I just happened to be one of the first. Now, with what's happened to my daughter, with her death, we have uncovered. It wasn't really covered, it's just people weren't looking for it. Something that is so sinister. It's so horrific that COVID just pales into comparison, as my dog growls. It's so sinister. In 2020, everyone became an organ donor in the United Kingdom unless you opt out. So we now have 13-year-olds then who are 20 now that don't know you have to opt out. On the 1st of June 2021, there's a document. I think it's a critical care document. It looks like 666 overlapping 3 sixes, but it's the C's, the way they've been done. Of course it is. And it talks in there about how Great Britain is going to be the biggest organ donors in the world, and we are going to be supplying organs to the entire Commonwealth. The gentleman who is in charge of the paramedic 2 and 3 trials, Gavin Perkins, was given a member of the British Empire this year. So you're now looking at why would we as Great Britain be supplying all the organs to the Commonwealth? And why would we in Great Britain, this small country, be the biggest organ donors in the world?
When you've got India.
Pardon?
You've got India.
Yes.
They've got 1 billion people. Why would we be supplying all of the organs?
Exactly. And the organs are from predominantly white people, because black people, ethnic minorities, Asians clearly are smarter. So now you have an exponential increase in organ donors. In 2015, Jeremy Hunt signed a document saying that they were going to do a scouting expedition, there's the words, to go out into the field to identify organs and how many they could get. And they used the air ambulance for this. So the air ambulance that the public pay for, and you constantly see them and everyone goes, oh, isn't it great, they're saving lives, are they? Or are they bringing the National Organ Retrieval Service to you? And you think you're being saved, but you might actually be getting prepped. This is what's going on.
I was held in Maidstone Hospital between the 22nd and the 24th of December 2023. At no point during my hospital stay did I say to anyone, I want to do chemotherapy, nor did I ever imply it.
So let's talk a little bit about what happened with Paloma. But first, could you give us an overview of your family, the members of your family, your family dynamics in this situation?
So I've got 4 children, all within 4 years of one another. I had a son, and then I had twins, a boy and a girl, and then I had another girl. So Paloma's my firstborn daughter. She's my third-born child, because she's 3 minutes younger than her twin. So she'd just finished her master's degree. Just finished Cambridge University 4-year course. She'd moved into a flat. She'd got her first job, Tunbridge Wells. And she'd gone on holiday to Sweden with her boyfriend for Christmas. And she phoned me. And she said, I'm on my way back. I've been called back. I had a biopsy. So she was going. I said, okay. She said, I think it might be cancer. I don't know what it is. And I said, I don't care about cancer. It's not a problem. It's not a problem. I said, don't worry about any of it. Just get yourself here. So she did, and she didn't know where she was meant to be when she arrived. I had to ring around, and she was to go to Maidstone to a haematology unit.
That's for blood. Yeah.
So, well, they're all getting diagnosed, young people now, with lymphoma. Isn't that interesting? It's very interesting. It's interesting that the marker that they used to use for TB, one of the markers they now use for lymphoma. It's interesting that the Department of Defense was given an appropriation for $10 million in America in 1970 over a 5-year period to create something so deadly that the human body wouldn't even be able to resist candida. And they made 70,000 of these, and they shipped them out to 500 labs. 70,000 modified RNA in 1970. And that was when you saw the emergence of lymphoma, leukemia, and AIDS-type illnesses. It's just quite interesting throwing that in. So she didn't know what she had. No one said anything. So I turned up the next day, and she'd had this biopsy. And basically, they told her that she had a diagnosis of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma B. So I went through everything with her, and she didn't have any of the symptoms. She had shoulder pain.
And non-Hodgkin's lymphoma would be what type of cancer? Can you give a few more details?
Of the lymph.
The lymph nodes, and that's in the chest or the lungs?
It was in her mediastinum. Not in the lungs, in the mediastinum. So she didn't have any symptoms. None of the classic. So I thought, that's a bit strange. She did have some superior vena cava syndrome where, it was pressing. And I asked to see the histology with her permission. I said, can we have the histology?
And the histology is
the biopsy.
Yeah.
And I said, and can we have her bloods? Can we have all her bloods, please? I said, is that all right, Paloma? Yes, it is. So that's her legal right. Her legal right is to see her histology and her bloods.
Under GDPR, because it's her data?
Yeah. So they said, why? And I said, I beg your pardon, why not? And I said, well, I need to see it because we have a team in Italy, Mexico, America, and Iran for second opinions. Is that not what you would do? It's the most important thing you should do. You want to see what they've done. Have they tested it for everything? So to cut a long story short, it didn't go well. They did give me the bloods, very reluctantly. And I thought, well, that's interesting because she doesn't have any signs of that in her blood either. One could possibly say there was an infection. So later the consultant phoned me at home, and we didn't get the histology. It was written in the nursing notes that we were not to be given the histology. The consultant had gone onto the ward that day and said that no one was to give Paloma or me or her family any notes or histology, nothing. We've got that. It was in her subject access request. It was written in the nursing notes. So the nurse has stated, Dr. Mohan said, we are not to give any documents to this patient.
And this Dr. Mohan, did he give any grounds for his...
There is no grounds. Dr. Arunadeya Mohan, consultant haematologist at the Maidstone Hospital. There is no grounds. It's illegal. The nurse also stating that she couldn't give them to us is breaking her code of professional conduct.
Do you have the name of this nurse?
Absolutely. So, of course I do. So she wrote it in the notes as well. Dr. Mohan later wrote that she facilitated my daughter having her notes.
Which is imprisonable.
Yes. But she's also in contempt of the Montgomery versus Lanarkshire case, 7 Supreme Court judges. People can go and look that up. And it was the case of in Lanarkshire Health Board, where a lady wasn't given all the information that she should have been given, and the doctors didn't give it to her, and her child was damaged. So there's that case. So when I left the hospital to go and come home, which is a considerable distance away, an hour and a half, look after my pets, then go and get Paloma lots of food and pyjamas from a 24-hour store, because she'd come from Sweden with nothing. They then went into my daughter's room and they told her, they'd asked me, could she have a small dose of steroids? I said, is that okay with you, Paloma? Small doses, 3 to 5 milligrams, up to 20. They went into her room.
What would be the effects of...
A small dose.
Yeah.
Well, they would say it's an anti-inflammatory. What the doctor actually said to us, it's going to melt your tumour away, which I thought was quite odd thing to say.
That's not accurate to what
No,
I
of
know
course
about
it's not.
steroids.
I also asked them to give her a blood thinner, to give her Fragmin, because she'd done a biopsy, flown to Sweden and flown back in a 24, 48-hour period, which, if what they were saying to us was correct, she was at higher risk of a blood clot because her clotting, and her platelets were up on her blood results, and your platelets clot your blood. So, of course, me being not a nurse anymore and being stupid and my head's opened and all my information's gone because I'm not registered anymore. That was, of course, tongue-in-cheek. When I left the hospital, they went into her room. They gave her the steroids, but they didn't give her that dosage. On the drug chart, it says they gave her 50. The doctor wrote on the letter that they gave her 90.
So they gave her either...
A huge dose. 3 or 4 doses, I think, huge dose. And
over 10 or 18 times the amount.
Yeah. And they also gave her, she had no wristband, so technically she's not admitted. 4 times she asked the nurse for her wristband, and on the last occasion the nurse said, "You're not to get one." Interesting. Just before I left, when I'd asked them for the histology and the bloods, I wanted them to absolutely assure me that my daughter was for resuscitation. And the doctor, senior house officer, Dr. Christian Anderson, he turned the entire screen round, the computer screen on a mobile screen, and showed me every single patient in the unit. Talk about breach of confidentiality. And right across them I could see, "Do not resuscitate" on lots. But what was interesting, and I followed it along and I said to him, "What's that?" Now I know what that is. It was a black triangle with an exclamation mark in it. That means new drug or combination of drugs, extra monitoring required. So Paloma she'd said to me, "I don't know if I'm going to do chemotherapy yet. I've spoken to Patrick. I'm undecided. I want to think about what I'm going to do. They've said that the treatment that they offer makes you infertile." I said, "Okay, well, you need to get all the information and then you need to sit down, collate everything and decide." At no time did I just said to her, "You need to get all the information first. We need all your bloods, we need your histology." So I go shopping, come back, and she calls me. I can't sleep. It's very late at night now, it's like midnight. I said, "Why?" She said, "They keep taking bloods from me every couple of hours and waking me up." I said, "Why?" She said, "And the machine keeps beeping." I said, "What machine?" She said, "They've put a machine up." I said, "Look at the machine, what is it?" She said, "Well, it's a saline flush." I said, "You don't have a machine for a saline flush." I said, "Is there a bag of fluid on it?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Is there a yellow sticker on it?" And she said, "Yes, there is, Mummy." I said, "That's a drug. It's a drug added to a bag of fluid. Can you read it for me?" She couldn't read it. I said, "Okay." I said, "Did you know you were having a drug?" She said, "No. They said it was a saline flush." I said, "Okay." And I said, "They've said a blood thinner and a little dose of steroids." So I arrived back at the hospital the next day, and later in the afternoon, and her boyfriend was there and the boyfriend's mother, and I had loads of food for her. And there's another bag full with another yellow sticker on. And she has a multi-port cannula in her arm, multi-port.
Which means they can give her a bunch of
Other
different
things, yeah.
drugs.
So I said, "Excuse me, what is that?" No, oh, that was it. I went in and I looked, and first of all I said, "Excuse me, have you got the blood results of my daughter's in histology? Paloma, you want them, don't you?" She said, "Yes, please." And she said, "I can't give them to you." I said, "What do you mean you can't give them to me? You have to give them. You have to give them. She's asked for them." "I can't use the printer." And I said, "Don't print them then. Write them down, date it, time it, and sign it." And she said, "I'll have to go and speak to someone." So she goes away and the sister comes in.
I'm surprised she didn't turn around and say she's got terrible handwriting.
That was the nurse who signed the document and said the doctor said they're not allowed to. The doctor had been in that day and said they're not to be printing or giving anything to either of us.
Legally.
Dr. Aaron Adair Mohan. And it says Dr. Mohan. We've got that as proof. And my daughter's written it in her statement as well, because my daughter did take this up with Maidstone. The sister came in and I said, "Excuse me, what is that drug?" And she said, oh, it's respiricase. So I've got drugs.com on my phone. It wasn't a drug I was familiar with. It's used to, when you've got tumour lysis, it's used directly before and directly after they've administered chemotherapy. That's what it's used for. So I said, Paloma...
Was it anti-sickness or
it's
something?
to stop tumour lysis, so they give you high-dose prednisolone with this drug. And this is how the nurse described it to a 23-year-old Cambridge graduate. She said... She started to tell me, I said, no, don't tell me. Paloma doesn't know that you're giving her a drug. And she said, you've got some nasty cells in you, and we don't like those nasty cells. So we want to get those nasty cells out of you because they collect in your kidneys. To a 23-year-old polyglot, multilingual. You've got some nasty cells. Well, actually, she was 22 at the time. She was just coming up for 23, 4 months later. You've got some nasty cells in you. So I pull it up and then I start seeing the side effects. And I'm thinking, well, this is not good.
So not only have they not told her about the drug, they've also not told her any of the side
She's
effects.
not got
So
a
there's no
wristband.
informed consent.
You cannot administer a drug. If you had no arms and legs, they can plaster that wristband on your chest. You cannot treat without an identification on a patient. Why? What if that patient's unconscious and you give the wrong patient the drug? Most of them have got a barcode on them now. You have to scan it. So she's not got a patient ID on. She's not consented. That drug and the drugs that they then came to give her that they'd given her and told her were painkillers, which were prophylactic chemotherapy drugs. They were given allopurinol, which you don't give with the respiricase anyway. They were giving her acyclovir, the Fragmin, the prednisolone, omeprazole. And when when they gave her that, I'll go back in a minute, I said, well, excuse me, what are you giving her? Because I recognised the acyclovir. And the Indian nurse said, oh, it's her prophylactic chemo drugs. I went, Paloma, have you made your mind up? Are you doing chemotherapy? She went, no, I've not made my mind up yet. I said, wait a minute. I said, do you know what these drugs are? She said, well, I thought they were painkillers and my steroid. I said, no, they're not. And the Indian nurse said, oh, she doesn't have to have it. I mean, she doesn't need acyclovir. She can have that within 48 hours of a viral infection starting. She doesn't need that. And she's not made up her mind. So why are you giving a prophylactic chemo? So I said to her, do you want this, Paloma? She went, no. So she didn't take it. So again...
And this is all within 24 hours?
Yes. So again, they've not got a wristband. She's not signed a consent. There is a consent form in the United Kingdom that must be given for these chemotherapy drugs all to be given. You have to have consented and you have to have signed for it. There is nowhere in the notes is that form. It was never signed. It was never done.
I will absolutely not set foot in Maidstone Hospital again. I was given drugs without my consent. Indeed, a low dose of steroids, 3 to 5 milligrams, turned out to be 80 to 90 milligrams. An IV bag I'd been told was a saline flush turned out to be a newly licensed, very dangerous drug named rasburicase. The side effects of these drugs started the minute I left the hospital, and they made me very sick for the entire month of January. With no wristband ever given to me, despite me asking nurses and doctors for it, Dr. Moen and her team had given me drugs with no consent. I have fallen victim to medical battery. Of course, I do not trust these doctors with my life. My other reasons for rejecting conventional treatment include my background in natural healing and my dislike of the odds I had been given. I had a 1 in 5 chance of dying during R-CHOP. I will not risk those odds for a diagnosis I do not have.
So I say to the nurse, the sister, we'd like the histology, and she said, we can't give it to you. We've been told we're not to give it to you. So then she said, we have to move Paloma to another room because we need this room for a patient that's coming in with positive pressure. And I looked around, I thought, nope. Your very sick patients, you always move next to the nurse's station. The further away you are, you're not as ill. So they moved my daughter to a room next to the nurse's station with no windows. and a big air conditioning unit thing at the side, which will blow out and cause a positive pressure to stop bacteria, etc., coming in. So they knew that her lymphocytes were about to hit the floor because they'd just given her a high dose of prednisolone, and they'd given her respiricase, which destroys your erythrocytes, your oxygen carrying blood cells. So your hemoglobin on your red blood cells, your erythrocytes, the oxygen binds to it, it destroys that. So they knew that was about to happen. Now, respiricase can kill. You don't give it to a patient until you've ruled out infection. They never ruled out infection. Then we finally get the histology. She does a subject access. She puts the hospital on notice. She gets out the next day. They pestered her, just sign this consent form. And she went, well, I'm not sure if I'm having chemotherapy. And they said, well, if you sign it, you won't need to worry about it. It can just sit there then, and, you know, so if you do decide, it's already done. And she tells me this on the phone. I went, don't sign that.
So they coerced her, they pressured her.
They're trying to get her to sign retrospectively because they'd already given the drugs
and
without her consent.
They knew they'd fucked up.
They knew. Oh, they knew. So now we've got a couple of nurses. We've got Christian Anderson, who didn't get a consent, who prescribed it. And you've got Dr. Aaron Adea Mohan in all the documents that we have, subject to access, not using the bundle, stating there. But the histology said differential diagnosis could not be confirmed with this tissue sample. They couldn't confirm it was exactly that. And it said must rely on imaging, symptoms, and they needed to do a FISH test. And that FISH test would have done a more intensive, but they didn't have enough specimen left to do the FISH test. So Mohan said 4 RCHOP on the documents, told my daughter, yes, you've definitely got that. You're for RCHOP.
What's RCHOP?
It's a particular type of chemotherapy that it kills 1 in 5 during it. So all these people going, oh, it's an 80% survival. Please do your due diligence. Forget the 80%. Put 5 people around a table. There's your 100%. Kill 20% of them, you're going to kill 1 in 5. That's a big number.
And they still hadn't confirmed the condition was actually cancer.
Exactly. They hadn't confirmed what she'd got. Now, if they'd have done the FISH test and it had showed it was this thing called double lymphoma or triple, giving her that CHOP, part of the chemotherapy, would have been so dangerous, it would have plummeted her survival to under 25% in 2 years. So that
75% chance of death
and
doing this.
100% chance of infertility. And then they wanted her to organise straight away to go and have all her eggs removed. They call it fertility preservation. I call it eugenics. So they wanted that.
That could have, destroyed her entire future. If she finds a man and they want to have
Was she
children.
even going to live?
Yeah.
Because I'll get on to what they did next. This is so sinister. So she wouldn't sign the consent. So she was on the phone to me, and the consultant walked in, and she dropped her phone on the bed. She was afraid. She said she was afraid of them. She was afraid they weren't going to let her out.
We are coming together.
We're coming together.
We are coming together.
We're coming together.
We are coming together.
We are coming together.
For the Wellness Way Festival.
The Wellness Way Festival.
The Wellness Way Festival.
The Wellness Way Festival.
The Wellness Way Festival. See you there.
See you there.
See you there. See you there.
See you there.
See you there.
I will see you there. Peace.
The doctor of your future is you.
So Paloma, to consolidate it down, she had no wristband, so she couldn't have been given any drugs. She was given respiricase, and she didn't know what it was. She was told it was a saline flush. So she was now being treated with part of the chemotherapy regime that required a fully informed signed consent. They should have had a wristband before they did anything. And she hadn't signed this consent, and they were trying to pressure her to retrospectively sign it. So they've just treated her for a differential diagnosis without ruling out infection with a drug that if it had been infection she had, it would have made the infection explode, giving prednisolone. So they've not ruled out, she's got signs and symptoms of infection, but they've not ruled that out. They've gone straight in. This is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma B because we've given you Hobson's choice. That's what they've done. Which is criminal. It is criminal. It's a criminal act. It's medical battery. And then, because she wouldn't sign the form, the doctor came in and she said, I'm going to have to let you home if you're not going to sign the consent. Well, no, you're going to have to let her home when she wants to go home. And then the doctor said, who's bringing you back in a couple of weeks for your chemotherapy? And Paloma said, well, I've not decided if I'm having chemotherapy. And Dr. Aranadea Mohan said, but you've already started. That's what she said.
So they admitted they gave her chemotherapy against her consent?
Yes. So there's no consent. So Paloma came home. Within 2 days, I had to phone her father in Germany. She became so ill. I actually thought she was going to die at one stage. And I said, I'm going to have to, take you to the hospital. Anyway, we kept at it.
Could I just check? Chemotherapy can make you infertile. So they may have sterilised her with this course of chemotherapy.
Well, we can't get to the bottom. So she came home. Within 48 hours, all hell let loose. She was vomiting. At the end of the day, when your cortisol levels dropped, she was really vomiting. She couldn't keep food down very well. Her appetite started to go. Some of her hair fell out.
That sounds like chemotherapy.
Yeah, she got the highest temperature ever. Her oxygen saturation went from 100% down to 72. Her pulse went from normal, because we've got all her charts, to 110, 120, a raging temperature. She was delirious. We had to manage that. And we just kept going. And then gradually, she started after a month. She started to get better. And that was the Boxing Day. The day after Boxing Day, her father arrived from Germany and stayed a week. She had these drugs Christmas Eve she came home. So she'd been given them Christmas Eve and the day before. Finally, we got to June and our oxygen went back up to 85%. And by July, it had gone up to 95%. Her lymphocytes had plummeted. So now she was at real... You need your T lymphocytes to kill mold, fungus, cancer. And they give you high-dose prednisolone, which takes them through the floor. How crazy is that? But they're the experts. The Respiricase is made from Aspergillus flavus. It's made by Sanofi in India. I went and researched it all, and I found where there'd been cases people had died, and they tested it, and the Aspergillus was now live. It's deadly Aspergillus. It's deadly if you get it in your body. And they said in this study that EMFs can cause it to be active because it's dead. It's latent. I found cases where people had died and it had become active. This was really concerning.
My mum's visits were often simply to bring me my favourite soups and brand new pyjamas, and to make sure I was being nursed properly. For example, she reminded staff that patients like me who were suffering from superior vena cava syndrome had to be nursed upright, not flat. She also spoke to the doctors and nurses about ascertaining my blood results and my histology, though the doctors refused both her and myself this information, a refusal which is indeed illegal. I found my mum's presence in the hospital with me to be very helpful and comforting. It was clear that nurses and doctors did not like her. Her approach is very authoritative. Although she wasn't rude to any of the staff, her tone and knowledge of the law and medicine clearly unsettled the nurses and doctors.
So she's been given these drugs without consent that are potentially deadly. They've made her so sick. She applies for subject access. She puts the hospital on notice immediately within a few days, legally. And she wrote to the CEO of the hospital, and she gets all her notes. And there was the histology. Differential diagnosis couldn't be confirmed in this specimen. And it needed we found out later, this is when we found out later, there wasn't enough specimen to do the fish test. The only reason we found that out was because our pathologist contacted their pathology department, and she said, why didn't you do the fish test? He said there wasn't any specimen left. There wasn't enough tissue.
So you've got documents from your daughter.
Everything.
Everything. You've got all of the subject access requests.
All the bloods, all of the dosages, the letters that the hospital hounded her then. They then said, they even in the notes describe her as the child. They then said that...
Child?
The child.
She was 23?
Yes. They then said, the boyfriend's mother, who, during my daughter's counselling, the counsellor who's a leading psychiatrist, psychologist, said they've groomed her. The mother's told her, was grooming her for quite a considerable time before it. And she went and told the doctors that my daughter couldn't make a medical consent. So she went and put this into their heads. So then all through the notes, through subject access, even though a lot of it was redacted, is this whole story playing out. I've worked in the NHS. I know what they write in notes. You better believe it, folks. And the notes can be changed, and they do get changed. They start spinning this tale that she's being coerced, which is nonsense, because her own witness statement that she made to the High Court, which, what happened next.
Growing up, natural healing and clean living was always our family's first port of call. Since I became independent after I moved to Cambridge for university, I have practiced the same principles that I grew up with. I've been extremely health conscious, sticking to all organic produce, I prepare my own meals, and I absolutely do not drink or cook with tap water. I have never taken drugs, despite pressure to, and rarely drink alcohol. I made my preference for natural healing over chemotherapy and radiotherapy very clear. I note that much of plaintiff's argument is centered on my mum being a notorious anti-vaxxer, which somehow proves she is an extremely forceful advocate of natural health. I too am anti-vax, as is my sister, as is my dad. This only serves to enforce that I am a dedicated advocate of natural medicine too, given my upbringing, and have long held the view that conventional medicine is not to be trusted. Indeed, both my sister and I even refused the HPV vaccine when it became available to us, due to our skepticism towards conventional medicine.
So they started contacting her at home, pressurising her, coercing her. That's what they were doing.
Harassment.
The consultant asked her GP if they could contact the police or something to see if they could convince her to come back and have treatment. That embodies coercion right there in Paloma's own words. She said that embodies coercion. Now all of the they get social services involved to see if there's any safeguarding issues. There was no safeguarding proven. There was no police thing proven that she was ever a safeguarding risk. There's nothing that I've ever done to any of my children. Nothing at all. And they're pressurising her. Then the next thing. So this is a girl trying to heal. She's chosen her therapies. She's got a therapist. She's going to different appointments. I'm taking her.
What therapies was she taking?
She chose to do the Gerson therapy. She wasn't able to do the full Gerson therapy at first because she was so sick because of the drugs they gave her. She went for hyperbaric oxygen therapy. She was seeing an osteopath. Later she wanted to try the Johanna Budwig as well protocol, which that's when she did start to get better all of a sudden.
And what is that? Can you explain that?
It's a specific diet, but Johanna Budwig noticed that all cancer patients, under the microscope, the hemoglobin had a very strange bluey-green tinge to it. And we know that, the oxygen carrying capacity goes down on these patients, or does it? Or is it the fact that it's the drugs? And she gave her patients cottage cheese mixed with the cold-pressed flax oil, a very specific amount, which it's known to draw oxygen to the cell, and within 3 months, all those patients, the cells had gone back to normal.
So she re-oxygenated them,
yes.
Which made them a lot healthier and able to fight the cancers.
All evidence-based. All evidence-based. These are treatments from a long time ago. Dr. Johanna Budwig, Dr. Max Gerson. So all of a sudden, when she incorporated that as well, her oxygen started to go up and she started to feel better.
I'm completely disgusted at Lisa's behaviour since I fell ill. From the minute she learned of my decision to reject chemo, Lisa sat at the foot of my hospital bed crying and refusing to talk to me all day. I felt she was emotionally blackmailing me to choose chemotherapy. She also kept leaving the room to speak to the doctors, supposedly to ask more questions about chemotherapy. I was very upset and annoyed she was interfering. It later turned out that she had been speaking to the doctors to try to persuade them to have me forced into staying. She made completely false claims that my mother had been so abusive that the police had to remove me. The doctors did not check with me if this statement was true, and this got published on all of my doctor's notes. Gabriel's poor mental health has always been of concern to me. He has spoken to several mental health professionals and is or has been on antidepressants. He is very unstable, struggling with rage issues that are very scary to watch and can leave you fearing for your safety. It is for these reasons that I choose not to tell him immediately about my decision not to do chemo. I was afraid what unstable reaction he would inflict on me. At approximately 1:30 a.m. on Christmas Eve, I was violently shook awake by my brother while my ex-boyfriend Ander watched. They had assaulted my mother, pushing past her to get to me. Having been in a deep sleep, the first sleep since leaving the hospital, I was confused and heavily panicked. I started to cry and throw up from the shock. My mum desperately trying to pull Gabriel off me because of my having had the drug, Fragmin, in hospital. This could have caused the mass in my chest to burst important blood vessels. Violently shaking me like that, Gabriel could have killed me. Once my mum had gotten the two men back downstairs, I heard Gabriel and Ander verbally abusing my mum and my mum's friend who was there for support. With such clear unstable behaviour at this attempt, he is in no position to objectively interfere in my bodily autonomy and health choices. His long text messages to me telling me I was going to die if I did not do chemotherapy I found to be both very distressing and incredibly manipulative. Sebastian's feigned concern for me is laughable. He has made little to no effort to even text me since I got sick, ignoring my messages and going the entire months of both February and March without anything. He only got back in touch at the end of March when both my mum and sister texted him saying I missed him. I found his blatant lack of concern for me extremely hurtful. Sebastian cannot possibly comment on my health and well-being in the months since I became ill because of this complete lack of contact. All the inaccurate information about me in his statement is hearsay from people who have also had no contact with me in months. Sebastian and I do not have a close relationship and go years without seeing or talking to each other. This is because when I see him, he becomes verbally extremely abusive and makes me very upset. With so little attempts to be in touch with his seriously ill sister, Sebastian's motivation for his involvement in this case do not include me. He sees an opportunity to attack our mum. He seems to crave her attention, while also desperately wanting to destroy her life. He purports to hate her, but spent 2 hours in her house on the 21st of October 2024 and hugged her upon leaving. With my situation, he sees an opportunity to attack our mum. The entire nation is aware of his interview with the BBC, which he would have received a substantial sum for. Jobless at 25, perhaps he is trying to generate media buzz again for a second interview and for more cash. Perhaps he is simply trying to ruin my mum's reputation and have her jailed so he can take ownership of her house, something he has attempted to do for years. He is not to be trusted.
But they hounded her from the hospital, and then she got a court summons to go to the High Court, where she was to appear, and I was to appear as the second respondent, and it was to take away her capacity.
So to declare her insane?
To say that she couldn't make medical decisions. Now, she'd already had a capacity report done by a leading psychologist who did her counselling because she was traumatised by it all.
With regards to Ms. Shemirani's susceptibility to coercion, it's my view that the risk of this is low given her psychological profile. During our sessions, we have discussed her ongoing treatment for health and the very positive progress she feels has been made since December 2023. Although the commitment to her treatment is intensive, she's never expressed a regret at her treatment decisions. Neither has she made any inference or direct reference to being coerced or pressured by other people, including her mother, in making her treatment choices. She has consistently expressed her relief of not opting for the treatment offered by the NHS, and in particular, she was very distressed at the likely prospect of becoming infertile if she were to have opted for those treatments. In my clinical opinion, I have no concerns that Ms. Shemirani has been coerced or unduly influenced by any individual when making a decision about her own medical treatment.
And the other interesting thing was, all through the literature, the consultant had said Paloma has capacity. We can't keep her here, she has capacity. So what they were trying to say was that she'd been coerced. And the piece of case law they put in was regarding a 5 or 6 year old. So they said, they had said that I was this notorious anti-vaxxer.
So they were targeting you because you took a stand for medical ethics during the lockdown, and they specifically went after your daughter because she was your daughter.
I think so. And would they have gone after anyone else who decided not to do chemo? I didn't do chemo. I decided not to do it. No one came after me.
Gabriel, what have you done? You've lost your way. I wish I could forgive you for what has gone on, but when your actions could cost me my life, your mistake cannot be erased. Gabriel, my minus day one. What have you done? You've lost your way. I wish I could forgive you for what has gone on, but when your actions could cost me my life, your mistake cannot be erased.
My son was the one who'd taken her to court with the other son. At the time it all came out, my daughter told me about a plot to take my house. My sons had seen a solicitor. They were trying to overturn my divorce.
How would that even work? I mean, your ex-husband's still alive.
Yes, and
You're
agreed
still
to
alive.
the divorce. Yeah, they wanted to challenge the divorce and take the house. And they'd tried it before. Sebastian had. He'd gone to my mother and said she was to tell me to move out of the house so that they could all sell it. I mean, it's just crazy. I have a will, and everything is sorted. And she told me about this, and she was very sorry that she'd been drawn into it. My other daughter wasn't, and she told me everything then. She told me everything that had been going on.
Because your sons have been radicalised against you?
Sebastian, it's the oldest one. I don't know what's going on. It's between him and the Lord now, whatever he's doing. Has he been compromised? Is he working for? Who knows what's going through his head?
Because I remember there was a hit piece on you before involving him, and what was, may I ask about the inducement for him to go along with that hit piece?
I haven't got a clue. He went to Eton, he went to LSE, nice Fabian University. Who knows? He's estranged from myself, his aunt in Australia, his grandparents in Australia, his father.
So he doesn't speak to the rest of the family,
No, well,
and it's him and his younger brother.
No, he's only just recruited the younger brother.
So the younger brother's now come on board with your older son.
I can see that that my younger son looks he looks in a lot of pain. He was, incidentally, in Paloma's notes, she had right bundle branch block, partial right bundle branch block, which is part of the heart. It's an anomaly. And her twin brother had the same thing when he was 17. He collapsed. He was in a wheelchair for the best part of 7 months. He missed his A-levels. This is a problem because he was having every year, having to go for tests on his heart every year. So what happened to Paloma could very well happen to him. And this is something he needs to take on board. So Paloma was dragged through the High Court when she's trying to heal. Can you imagine all the stress? So she's terrified they're going to take away her capacity to choose and force her into something she doesn't want to do and take her eggs from her. It was all treatment for lymphoma. And the legal firm representing my son pro bono turns out to be a leading law firm that specialises in fertility. And
pro bono?
Yes.
So he didn't actually have to pay for any of these lawyers?
No, and they had 3 barristers in the court on one day as well.
Oh, that's a lot of money. That's, the tens of thousands.
Absolutely.
And
so,
is your son a wealthy...
No, he's a student. He's a student at LSE. So he has a law firm representing him. 2 or 3 barristers are in the court. The law firm is in London and Brighton, and it specialises in fertility treatment, in posthumous ownership of your eggs should you die. Are you beginning to smell a rat?
Yes.
And they're representing my son pro bono. So they go to court without us knowing. They get this order. They spin whatever lies they've spun. Now this law firm pushes and they want access to all my daughter's medical notes, all her private notes. They take us into court several times. And then during this time, my daughter very quickly, she only saw her boyfriend a few times from when she came out of the hospital in the December. She finishes with the boyfriend, then falls apart, gets upset, and tells her friends and us of 2 sexual assaults that he'd done while she was sick, very sick. And she then fills in a police report online, very embarrassed. Then she sends it to the chief constable, with the crime reference number, and she was then interviewed by a male officer. And so then, we said, well, she really needs a female officer. So a female officer contacted her and she'd started to rewrite her statement. That is still live. That is the other young man, Arnder Harris, who was on the Panorama report. He's on the Panorama report introducing himself as her boyfriend. But he sexually assaulted her, according to Paloma, and there is a live statement.
And you've got the statement?
Yes, and the police still have it. And we've got the email where she sent it to Joe Shiner, the Chief Constable of Sussex, with the crime reference number. And this is who Panorama had on. So that relationship's ended. So the last time they put incredible pressure on Paloma, they had the social services said, the social services didn't want to get involved. They were in court. They said there is nothing. There's no safeguarding. There's nothing. The police said there's nothing. They even demanded that Paloma be seen by a social worker who would come to our home and assess me and her for the dynamics. And we said, no, of course not. We're not going to consent to that nonsense. When she has a leading psychiatrist, psychologist who gives evidence for the Crown, who's already assessed her and said she had full capacity, the chances of her being ever coerced was so rare, low. And he's counselling her because of post-traumatic stress now, because of the boyfriend, his mother, the doctors at the hospital. She's terrified of doctors by this time because this is all happening to her.
I do not have a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma B diagnosis. It is a differential diagnosis in which cancer could not be ruled out. I have not had any of the classic symptoms of lymphoma, no lymph nodes, no night sweats, no fatigue. My blood results over the past few months do not indicate lymphoma, and on the histology it states I was lacking in the main marker for lymphoma. Why, with all this doubt, would I undergo a treatment plan so harsh I might not survive it, and would be rendered infertile if I did? I'm 23. I do not want to be made infertile.
Throughout this, did you find out what it might be that Paloma had instead of this diagnosis?
We had some suspicions that it was possibly when Paloma and Gabriel were 2 days old and they were 5.5 weeks premature. Paloma weighed 4 pounds, Gabriel weighed 5 pounds 12. Because they were mixed race, I was told they had to have the TB shot before they left the hospital. They should have never been allowed. I was foolish, I was ignorant. I was a nurse. And they were given the TB vaccine, both of them, and it's interesting that they've both had problems in their chest. They were caesarean section, so you have a weak diaphragm when you're caesarean section. So now we have this law firm, and the very last time she appeared in court, I can't imagine. I saw her screaming and terrified. This law firm, this is what they proposed. And I've put this out on Twitter. I've put the document from the court. They wanted me removed from my house that I own. Removed. They wanted an injunction to stop Paloma seeing me and me seeing Paloma. I was to leave this house as it was, but I was to pay all the bills every month. They wanted to install Lisa Falk, the boyfriend's mother, the ex-boyfriend who Paloma's now got a police report that he sexually assaulted her twice. Her words, she signed it. She's also given that to the High Court, saying that he sexually assaulted her. So this law firm put their proposal in that they wanted access to all her notes, everything, and they wanted to put Lisa Fawkes, the boyfriend's mother, in my home with Paloma, which would have then made it a safeguarding risk with the boyfriend as well. She's completely blocked this woman.
Meanwhile, making you homeless and expecting you to pay the bills.
And this is my place of work, as you've seen. Yeah. And my pets, leave my pets. This woman hates animals as well. But wait a minute, I own this house. And they wanted to force Paloma into all treatment for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma B and force her into a program to reconnect with her two brothers.
I'm delighted with my chosen treatment plan. All my original symptoms that took me to the hospital, swollen face, excruciating chest pain, intense headaches from pressure on my carotids, inability to move my right arm, have completely gone. My energy levels increase day by day, so I have seen lots of my friends and my sister visits regularly. I even threw a birthday party in Brighton, which was attended by my sister, my 2 best friends, my mum, and her friend. To suggest I'm being isolated is ridiculous. I have lots of people visiting. I choose not to see my twin brother because, as he has stated in texts, he will do anything to get me to start chemo, and I am afraid of him. My boyfriend took advantage of me when I was most vulnerable. I am unsafe in his presence. Lisa's coercive behaviour in the hospital and stalker-like behaviour since means I want no relationship with her ever again. The situation is also being monitored by monthly blood tests booked with my GP. After each set, I have an appointment with Dr. Hutchins to discuss the results and to check over my general health, checking energy levels, appetite, mood, etc. My blood tests show that all my levels are returning to normal. There has been a lot of talk about undergoing a CT scan. In December 2023 alone, I had 2 X-rays and a CT scan on my chest. Concerned about that amount of radiation, I spoke with a senior radiographer with 20 years of experience, Simone Plout. She informed me that to have another scan just 6 weeks later would involve a considerable amount of radiation which would carry iatrogenic risks later in life. I then made the decision not to have a scan so early on in my treatment. I intend to have a CT scan, but I will wait until my entire team agrees that this is the best course of action. The fact that my own brother has brought a court case against me while I'm focusing all my energy on recovering from a life-threatening illness is shameful. The stress of the stream of emails from his lawyers, the energy I've just wasted writing statements while spending all my savings just so I had some form of legal representation, has caused me an insurmountable amount of harm and suffering. I cannot sleep from stress, and the anxiety has taken away my appetite. Are a good night's sleep and eating not the pillars of recovery from any illness? It is well known that King Charles is an avid supporter of natural healing. Indeed, his decision to opt for natural medicines and treatment for his own cancer diagnosis barely generated any discord in public opinion. I have clear, even proven capacity, and made a decision about my health that corresponds with my upbringing and lifestyle, yet this decision was met with the most horrific resistance and accusations. I find the plaintiffs' behaviour, particularly Gabriel's and Lisa's, to be incredibly coercive. They are fighting hard for me to be forced into receiving the treatment they want me to have. The side effects and implications of these drugs are extreme, and it is my body that will endure them, not theirs. It is much easier to be involved when the high stakes are played out far from your body or your safety.
This is a 23-year-old, she was 23 by now, polyglot, multilingual, Cambridge graduate, dress designer, ran a fashion show and hired all the models and the designs.
Dancer as well.
Rodin scholar who got the highest A-levels in the country, a ballet dancer. She played the harp, violin, piano, was loved by all. She'd lived in Portugal for a year as part of her 4-year degree. She had a flat. She had to give a flat up because she was on statutory sick pay and she couldn't pay the rent, and her car was a jalopy. It wasn't going to fail. It was going to fail its MOT. Had lots of oil leaks, so she sold it. And this is what they wanted to do. Do they do that to other people? The reason the public need to listen to this is because what it's telling me is they are going to take away consent. They want everyone in the UK, it's written in that critical care document, Matt Hancock, they want it to be that whenever you die, it is assumed that everyone is an organ donor.
Do you want to go a little bit more into this?
Which part?
The organ donation.
So everyone became an organ donor as of the 20th of May 2020. On the 1st of June, Matt Hancock signed that they would become the leading organ donors in the world, the UK, supplying organs to all of the Commonwealth. We also now have in the United Kingdom that all babies born in the United Kingdom will be tested for 62 genetic disorders. In the documents that Matt Hancock's in, it says that babies over 2 months of age, if they have life-threatening or life-limiting conditions, they can be used for organ donor and entire systems. What's on that life-limiting list? Epilepsy.
So if you've got an epileptic baby, they can just
HIV.
carve them up?
Well, epilepsy, HIV, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I know a 25-year-old that lives very well. What's interesting now is you've seen the assisted dying bill passed. Let me put it to you. You've got young women. I'm so sorry. Your child's got has got a genetic disorder that's going to be very life-limiting, and it's going to be very difficult for you. They're going to become very ill. But look, if we let your child slip away, then we can let other people live on. How easy do you think that would be? I mean, Buller and Hitler would be, find this incredible. They've far exceeded this, a life not worthy of life. This is eugenics. When you start testing babies for 62 genetic disorders, we already had the Galleri trials with all the older people, and they identified that there was an extra 2/3 of them, you're going to get cancer, and then they pre-treated them. So this is horrifying. Now, also in those documents, we referred to the one in 2015 where Jeremy Hunt said they wanted to do a scouting expedition to identify how many organs there were out there. So they used the air ambulances to take the doctors out there to identify potential organ donors at the scene of accidents, trauma, collapse.
So what happened next with Paloma, and how is it involved with the organ harvesting?
What happened here was it was a really hot day like today, and Paloma had a big smoothie, went to an appointment at 11 o'clock. We went shopping. She looked beautiful colour, was absolutely fine. We went and she got me a coffee. We came home, she sat outside FaceTiming her sister. Her sister took a screenshot of her time-stamped. She came inside, it was really hot. She had what was her breakfast for lunch out here. And then at about maybe 5:15, she said to me, "Oh, Mummy, I'm going to watch a movie. It's really hot upstairs. Can you bring my dinner upstairs?" The handyman was there putting that mirror up for her ballet in her sitting room upstairs and a mirror in the downstairs closet. He said hello to her, he had a laugh, and she went upstairs, and he left about 5:30, 5:45, and she was eating her food upstairs, and she would bang on the floor when she wanted something or ring me. And if I was on my phone, she'd bang on the floor, because her bedroom, when she bangs, I can hear it in the kitchen. They all used to do that. She banged on the floor, and I said, I went upstairs. I said, "You all right?" She said, "I can't breathe." And she was suffering severe panic attacks because of this court case. Who wouldn't? Terrible panic attacks. She was having counselling still. She said, "I can't breathe." She was eating.
I can imagine, especially when you've got the chance of completely losing your autonomy.
And taking all your eggs. And your home and your mother, who you see as your protector. And you're going to put your boyfriend who's sexually assaulted you in the most vile, violating way, shortly after you've just vomited. That's Paloma's words. And the woman she absolutely hated, put in your house. And you're going, do you know what it involves when you force someone into chemotherapy? I've seen it happen in the States. They handcuff them. They come with police escort and they handcuff them and take them out of their homes and handcuff them at the hospital until they've sedated them. So she had all that trauma, and she said, I can't breathe. And then her eyes rolled back and saliva came out of her mouth. And the rest, I couldn't get a pulse. I put her in the recovery position, ran and got an airway. You've been in my house, right at the bottom of the stairs. I rang my friend at the same time. I had my phone in my hand as I'd gone upstairs. Took the chain off the door at the same time. Ran upstairs within 30 seconds. I put her on her back, put the airway, did a sweep of her mouth in case it was vomit. She choked. Put her on her back, put the airway, the Goodell airway in her mouth, which I have in my treatment room, and her airway was open. Couldn't feel a pulse. She wasn't clammy and cynosed, and I began CPR. And we rang an ambulance. My friend arrived. We rang an ambulance. I carried on doing CPR, basic life support. And then I stopped to check, and I thought, well, she's not clammy. She's not cyanosed. So I told my friend, run and get my pulse oximeter out my treatment room. It's not a cheap one, it's a really good one, and my stethoscopes, which she did in seconds, downstairs and back up. I told her how to put it on. I said, and we'd had oxygen when she was really unwell. It's just one that anyone can use. And it was still pushed under this table in her room. I said, grab that, plug it in. We put the nasal cannula in her nose, turn the oxygen up, but the pulse oximeter straight away, 40, 45, 50, it started going up. She had a pulse. And then the oxygen saturations, and it was 110, 140, and then her oxygen sats were going up on this oximeter. And I put the stethoscope in and held it over her apex, over her heart, and I could hear her pulse, just really fast. And I thought, she's just She was only ever just under 7 stone, and she was now just under 6 stone. She'd lost a stone from when she was really sick that first 2 months. And now she'd started to gain her appetite back, and she was just tachycardic, and her blood pressure must have been so low. So I stopped, and then it was, all the panic was then off, and then it disappeared off the screen, so I started again. And then it disappeared, and we started again. And then the paramedics all started to come in. The paramedic arrived. He had a gun in his hand, an intraosseous gun. He said, she's very slight. I said, she's under 6 stone. More came in. There was about 6 of them, the doctor and the air ambulance. And I thought that was quite odd, so many. And I stood outside the door then. But I watched him shoot her in the leg, and then I watched them put a femoral line, which I thought was quite odd, because I've done my advanced trauma and life support.
So what was he doing when he shot her in the leg?
He was shooting her into the tibia with an intraosseous line. Now, what I was taught, if you can't get IV access with a wide bore cannula, the best route to give the drug is endotracheal, but that would be a last resort if you can't get a vein or if someone's got no tissue. He went straight in. And he gave her that, and then another, and then they arrived with the air ambulance, and they put a femoral line in, and they gave a drug. And then I saw all hell let loose. I saw her entire body go purple ashen, which means circulatory collapse. It means all your blood vessels have collapsed. Adrenaline vasoconstricts, and the other drug they gave her, metoronidazole, that causes the constriction.
At this time, was her heart still beating?
Yes. According to the life pack machine, she had a heartbeat. She was never in cardiac arrest. Their own printouts say that. You cannot give the adrenaline like that as bolus doses. That's not the protocol. So now she's gone ashen, and the paramedic was kneeling where I'd been kneeling, and I'm standing outside the door watching this. I never said anything. I was quiet because I was watching the whole thing and trying to take it in. The only thing that they asked, we need a drip stand. I said, I've got a drip stand. Of course I did. I've got a treatment room downstairs. They caused that collapse. And then they called she said asystole. And they then, how many minutes till the next dose of adrenaline? They ended up giving her 4 doses, 4 milligrams. She was 38 kilos roughly the day before. That's 12 times the dose for her body weight. They'd already identified that she was small because they couldn't get an adult-sized cannula in. They'd put an adolescent one in. He couldn't get the adult gel airway in and caused barotrauma. So he had to use an adolescent size. So why they would go with that dosage when I'd already said she's under 6 stone? This is gross negligence manslaughter, totally.
So they killed her?
They've pushed all the blood from the brain towards the heart. They get her in the ambulance, they intubate her. And I said, you're not going to take her to Maidstone, are you? Because she's got a case against them. Which I know is really serious because she's identifying that they've treated her with no consent, possibly a trial with the black triangle. She's a target on her back. And let's pretend here that doesn't happen, because we know it does. They get her in the ambulance. I told them to be careful going down the stairs because my stairs are narrow one side and lots of people have fallen, all of us. They go in the ambulance and they don't leave. Why did they not take her back in the air ambulance, the helicopter that they brought themselves in? If she was in cardiac arrest and so ill, why are they not taking her back in the air ambulance? Because this is rush hour now.
So they had a helicopter?
They had a helicopter that never took her anywhere. But they didn't
Where
leave.
did it land?
It brought the doctor and the paramedic here.
And it landed around the corner, presumably?
The back. On a little bit, not far from here. But it never took her back. So the ambulance sits outside my property for 20, 30 minutes. Exactly. Why? Because they were administering more drugs in that ambulance. And the same drugs that are used on death row. Those drugs should not be given unless you're in theatre. They were hardcore paralysing drugs.
What did they give her?
They gave her rocuronium, fentanyl, more adrenaline, midazolam. She didn't stand a chance. And they'd already given her the 4 milligrams bolus. She wasn't waking up. They knew damn well she wasn't. They go down to the hospital, and between here and the hospital, they do 2 thoracotomies. They do 2 chest drains because her oxygen sat started to drop. Now the paramedic comes back in my house and he's really sweating and he's nervy, giggling. He was giggling outside. My friend stated that, how weird it was. He's giggling.
They did this to mess you up.
Well, it's self-exculpatory evidence because they messed up. They didn't follow their protocol. They overdosed her. How do we know they overdosed her? When we arrived at the hospital, she's got a huge surgical emphysema now in her neck. They tried to say, oh, it's the tumour. No, I have a time-stamped photograph of her taken at 2:30 in the afternoon the same day, and that wasn't there. This is where they've rammed an airway in. They've caused air to leak from her airway. She's got this big surgical emphysema. Now she's got pink sputumy mucus coming out of her nose.
Pink?
Pink. And the suction bottle in the intensive care unit is absolutely full. Both myself and a radiographer, who's also witness to it, and 2 other people, we all witnessed it. The suction container is full of it. That is a side effect of overdose of adrenaline. That is a classic overdose because it starts to backfill in the lungs. No wonder they had to do the thoracotomies because they'd overdosed her. So now she's in there with all these drugs. She's very, very light. And you should always tell the family when you're going to do a brainstem test. They did it without us there and told me later. We want to make her do not resuscitate. I said no. They said, well, we've done a brainstem test. She's brainstem dead. And then I said, you shouldn't have done that without us there. And I demanded another one. They also said, oh, we think she's coned. I went, well, that's not true though, is it? Because you get a particular thing, Cushing's triad. You never mentioned that again to me. I had another doctor who used to work many, many years in the NHS. He was advising me over the phone. He was a consultant in intensive care. He said, you must ask them to do this and to do this. Why are they rushing with someone so young? Straight away on day 1, I said, she's not for organ donor. She's opted out. And all they said was, we need to see the power of attorney. It was her wet signature on the power of attorney form, but they wouldn't honour it because it hadn't gone through the courts yet. But it had been witnessed that was her wet signature.
And it's valid. Simple as.
They wouldn't honour it. They wouldn't show us the documents. They wouldn't show us the brain scan. So finally they said they were going to turn the ventilator off. And we all went in a room and I said, I would like you to do... They said she's brainstem dead. We're going to turn it off. It's in her best interests. I said to them, if this was America, you wouldn't be doing it because she had brain activity. But the bar for brain activity in the UK is lower. In America, it's any activity. Here, it's... So she had brain activity. They said it was chaotic. It was white noise, his exact words. But then he said, oh, that was the wrong choice of words.
Well, they just gave her a load of drugs, including fentanyl,
exactly.
Which is a psychoactive drug.
All of those drugs that they gave her suppress brain activity. They say, but the half-life of these drugs, they'll be out the body by now. Well, yes. But if you've just taken somebody that's very low body weight, a woman that has higher estrogen, that has more body fat, you're going to metabolise those drugs slower. But also, the longer someone is on a ventilator, the more drugs you give, you have a synergistic effect, you have a concomitant effect, and it's going to take longer. And based on the amount of adrenaline alone and the amount of time she was on a ventilator, we calculated they should have left her at least 100 hours before they ever did the brainstem test. They were in a hurry to do it. They said she was brainstem dead. We asked them to do another one with us there. It was too soon. And then they said they were going to turn it off the next day at 12 o'clock. And I asked them, there was 4 of us in the room as witnesses. I said, well, could you do the CT scan or the MRI scan to show blood flow through her brain? We'd like that done. And he said, no, because if she dies on the table, it will upset my staff and I have to think about my staff. And I said, I wasn't aware you could die twice.
It'll hurt their feelings.
Yes. But the most If she's brainstem dead, how can she die again? 4 of us witnessed it, and 4 of us have signed a statement. This is what was said. They're trained and qualified in that unit. I'm sure they see a lot of death. I'm sure they see a lot of death down at Scan every day. But I wasn't aware that the National Homicide Service put the patients...
the nurses' feelings.
The nurses' feelings, yes. Now, one of the things that we found with the National Organ Retrieval Service is the doctors and nurses work for it, as well as their jobs. They can't be identified. They employ a snod, which is a nurse that is embedded, this is their words in the documents, embedded in every intensive care unit, whose job it is to identify potential donors. The best donor has a beating heart with a circulation under the age of 30. Brainstem death is a lie. You cannot take an organ from a cadaver. If your heart is beating and you are metabolizing fluids, you're passing urine, feces, metabolizing a liquid feed, you're not dead. Life begins at conception. Death begins with cessation of the respiratory system, the cardiac system, and the neurological system, and then decay begins. This whole lie about brainstem death was a eugenics wet dream. When you had the first heart transplant in South Africa, and then they did a heart transplant with 2 babies, and it went horribly wrong, so they came up with this whole brainstem death thing. It is the most, you're talking about they're doing gene editing to try and fix families that marry their cousins, and so they have a lot of genetic problems, and how they're going to fix them at a cost of millions on the NHS.
Pakistanis.
But the only test they've got to see if you're brainstem dead is rubbing your eyeball with a bit of gauze, squeezing ice cold water in your ears to see if you get nystagmus, your eyeballs knocking, pressing on pain areas. You could press on my pain areas, I wouldn't even squeal. I had a baby upstairs on the picnic mat with no pain control. I mean, to say that, and then they do this...
That's the test for brainstem death.
And then they do the worst thing. They remove the ventilation for another 5 minutes to see your blood gases. Well, what's that going to do? It's going to further compound. Now, one of the things that did happen, I did ask the nurse, was my daughter on any drugs for cerebral edema, for brain swelling? Because if the brain is without oxygen, you'll get swelling. And she said no. No, she's not on any of those. She doesn't have any brain swelling. So when we came back after the very famous, if she dies on the table, it will upset the staff, the nurse was giving a drug, and I said, what are you doing? And she said, oh, Paloma's a little bit dry. I said, well, of course she is. And she said, she's passing lots of urine. And I said, well, she is, because her body's trying to get rid of all those drugs you've put in her. And she said, well, it's probably pressure on her pituitary gland. I said, but you've just told me she doesn't have any brain swelling, and you're not giving her any drugs for that, so which is it? And she just closed her mouth, looked worried, and she said, I don't have to give it. I said, you do though, don't you? Because I believe they were making sure her organs were good. Now, when I went in the next day and I said, I want it in writing with a wet signature, you will not take any of my daughter's organs, nothing will go from her, and if it does, I'm going to sue you personally in your personal capacity and everything you own, and you, to the nurse. And he said, I have personally rang up the team and emailed them and stood them down. They are waiting, and it even says in the documents, even if you have opted out, they can approach a family member or friend who can consent for you. And they've got this whole rhetoric and videos that they play about your loved one will live on, they're going to save the lives of X amount of people, think about the gift that they'll be giving. It's total eugenics and emotive coercion. That's what it is. It's disgusting. It's despicable. These people are maniacs. They're homicidal maniacs. It doesn't matter whether you opt out. If they are coming to you, and all of the paramedics now are adopting the Paramedic 2 trial ran by Gavin Perkins and Charles Deakin, who commandeered the air ambulance, and this has now been adopted by the World Health Organization, and only 2.7% survive with any commodity of life. The majority die, and of those, the ambulances are just delivering a bag of organs to the hospital because of those that do make it to the hospital, 93%, I think it is, will die there and then. The remaining 33% of that remaining 7% will have such brain damage of 4 to 5 on the Rankin scale. 6 is death. 4 to 5 is vegetable status, which means what are they going to do? They're not going to treat you actively if you get pneumonia. They're going to be saying, we're going to let your loved one pass away. Have you considered organ donor? Because you've got the snod nurse circulating like the vulture. These documents are all in the public domain. I've spoken to some pathologists now. Have you ever had one of your clients wake up during their post-mortem? No. And yet in those organ retrieval documents it states, people say, oh, you can't give organs if you've got cancer. Maybe not in this country, but there's lots of things they can take from your body. However, other countries have a different bar. So other countries will take people with genetic disorders. So you have the National Organ Retrieval Service identifying patients as organ donors in the very documents. It's on my Twitter feed. It actually states that 50% of the people at retrieval will have some kind of response when you try to take their organs. They'll arch their backs, which is the Lazarus response. They'll open their eyes. They'll turn their head one side or the other. They'll cross their arms across their body. They'll try and turn away. They'll extend their arms and legs. Their toes will go up. Their pulse goes up. They'll start sweating. Their blood pressure goes up. I've asked, has any of your clients woken up in a pathology? No. Why is that? Because they're dead. So how come it's allowed with those getting their organs? Now, in one of the documents I recently showed to
these people, they're showing responses that they're alive and
Yes.
they don't want to have their organs ripped
Yes.
out of them, and they're having their organs ripped out whilst
you can't
they're alive.
anaesthetise them because they're just paralysed. They paralyse them because you don't want to damage the organs.
And so they feel the pain
Of course.
as they're having their
That's why your
organs
pulse
cut out
goes
of
up.
them.
Yep, that's right. Now, one of the documents actually states, I'm going to give you the document, I've got it on my phone. The document actually states in the document that if the heart is beating enough to adequately perfuse the brain, you must step away from the trolley, the patient, when you're trying to get their organs, step away, remove ventilation, call the National Organ Retrieval Service that will be in the hospital, and they might then call the anaesthetist to anaesthetise the patient so they don't, quote, suffer. How can you suffer if you're dead?
They're dead.
And to give more paralysing agents.
How many people is this happening to?
Every day. Every day.
Hundreds?
Every day in the United Kingdom now, people are organ donors unless they opt out. 2-year-olds, babies,
They're being cut
adolescents.
open alive.
All of these people that have collapsed with heart attacks, did they die of their heart attack or did they die of the adrenaline? It has been known for 53 years that adrenaline causes vasoconstriction. The French study states it will sacrifice the brain to get the heart started. So they are delivering organs to the hospital, the paramedics are, the paramilitary, effectively now. They're being called out. If it's a cardiac arrest, they're going to get your heart started. But they're going to sacrifice your brain. So what can they say when you arrive there? I'm so sorry. Johnny's brainstem dead. Would you like him to live on? So it's now a military-grade battlefield intraosseous gun from Teva Pharmaceuticals in Israel that's being used. The majority of the adrenaline, epinephrine, is the name for it, comes from Israel, from Teva Pharmaceuticals. Merck has stated that at the moment their market for adrenaline, epinephrine, is 3.6 billion. Their documentation states that by 2032 their market will jump to 7.11 billion.
So there's a lot of money in it.
People need to wake up because you might opt out of vaccines, you might opt out of everything. But when you drop, for whatever reason, and I'm going to give you a possibility, somebody's going to ring 999. If you're found dead in your bed, if you get killed, if you die of old age, if something happens to you and you have a seizure, anything, someone's going to call 999. What service do you require? An ambulance is going to come. They're going to give you that adrenaline and you're going to die. The French study said by the 3rd dose, the brain is ruined. They can give you up to 10 doses. So, Wills, you're really big, you're tall. My daughter was tiny 3.5, 4 in a shoe. A £250 man will get the same dosage as a 37-kilogram woman.
That's mad.
Of course it's mad.
But when did this become the protocol with the adrenaline to start dosing people at these levels?
2017, Gavin Perkins from Warwick University began the Paramedic 2 trial. They've now adopted it. The World Health Organization has just said that they're going to be adopting that worldwide. He's head of the National Institute for Health, I can't remember, NIH Research, NIHR. He's right at the very top of
in the United States.
Well, here.
Oh,
I think it's there. Yeah, he's right high up. He's also
so he's under Kennedy.
Very high of the Resuscitation Council. Very high in the Resuscitation Council. He has just been given this member of the British eugenics. Oh, sorry, I meant Empire. He's effectively running the trials and awarding himself the money for the trials. Now, in South Korea, Japan, and China, with a bystander, member of the public, doing mouth-to-mouth and compressions, they have a 25% survival. Denmark, 33%. Seattle, I think it's a 68%. But we're not going to be doing what they do. We're going straight for the intraosseous. Give the adrenaline first. If you're in cardiac arrest, toast the brain. And there you've got your organ donor. What might cause people to collapse? Well, we know that during lockdown, let's talk about the elephant in the room. What did they do? What was the one thing was exempt from the boogeyman virus that they could continue working all night? The laying of the 5G in every town and every city, on the top of every hospital, every school. It's on the top of every single street lamp, even though they're not insured. Every single city is now being replaced with LED lights, known to make your blood sticky. So you're going to have a lot more people, they've said, are going to be having seizures, are going to be having anaphylaxis.
And then there's the jabs as well, of course.
Yeah. So anaphylaxis, you know, and we're not saying don't take EpiPens, but a lot of doctors are against the adrenaline and they want to use other drugs. But, you know, you start giving, there was the very famous case of the young girl on the British Airways flight that had the pret-a-manger sandwich. And she was allergic to, I think it was sesame seeds or nuts. And she went into anaphylactic shock. Her father was a GP. And she's given 2 adrenaline shots. Well, at altitude, what is the cabin pressure? Is it 17,000 feet, which will trigger the seatbelts? This is why you get drunk much easier on an aircraft. So that adrenaline is going to have a much more profound effect in a pressurized cabin. Did she die of that? Did anybody autopsy her head? In the Paramedic 2 and 3 trial, I'll get on to the Paramedic 3 trial, they didn't autopsy the people. They didn't say that whether they autopsied the people's heads to see if they died of adrenaline. The Paramedic 3 trial was done on the public of East Sussex by CCAM, South East Coast Ambulance, that are doing many trials all on their own. Nobody's looking at them, using all these paralysing agents with HEMS, the air ambulance. And they were running from Warwick University, the Paramedic 3 trial. It was a cost analysis trial. That means it wasn't for your benefit. It was to find out the cheapest way, the most cost-effective way of getting the adrenaline in you. So they got an envelope. Half of those at cardiac arrest were to get it into intraosseous, which is the best way to give it.
And just an injection into
the venflon, into the systemic circulation. The other half, which is the worst way to give it, with the worst outcomes in their own literature, they were to get it directly into the bone. Now you're going to suffer bone fracture, the possibility of a fat embolism. It's very painful. They waived consent. So half the people are going to get a method that has a much less favourable outcome for a cost analysis trial. Do the public of East Sussex know that they were just enrolled? Did the public of the United Kingdom know that they were enrolled in the Paramedic 2 trial to be adopted by the world? Would the public want to consent for that? Should that not be on a billboard in every town and city? Do you consent to this? Should the public be paying for an air ambulance to bring the NORS team out? If you can't smell the stench of death and the money, and it's cash for corpses, they're mocking us. They're laughing at us. They're using the very people that through history have always been used at times of great tyranny, and that's those in positions of great trust and authority, and it's the doctors and nurses. We've already seen it with COVID. So this is what they did, a paramedic 2 trial, the paramedic 3 trial. So they now know it's the worst thing to do. But the World Health Organization has announced that that's what they're adopting. God help us all.
And that'll be moving worldwide, I take it?
Yes. America, Australia, it's going to be everywhere. Now let's just go back now to Lucy Letby. I was one of the first that called that. I got death threats all over social media. The amount of adrenaline they give the babies in the UK is higher than Europe. Why? Are they not all the same size? That unit had babies far too young that it should have been taken. It had sewage leaking into the roof space. It had body products from the theatres. It had lots of other people entering that unit, not just Lucy. Lots of deaths occurred when she wasn't there. How many of those babies, because they were going into cardiac arrest, were given adrenaline? You wouldn't need to starve the brains of oxygen, would you? Because the adrenaline will do it. How many of those babies received, I don't know what other drugs they received, but I'm sure they received plenty of drugs to keep them still while they were on ventilators. You start giving adrenaline, now you've got a big problem. How many died of that?
I'm guessing half, more. Who knows?
I'm guessing probably most of them. It actually said in a study that had gone on that unit, they did an inquiry into the unit several years before, and it was medical negligence. They had doctors performing 8 and 10 umbilical catheters when you should only do 1 or 2 because they were inexperienced. They had a consultant who wasn't on the unit often. My daughter's dead. Tomorrow it will be you and yours. Only you might not recognise it because you've not worked in that arena. You might not have done the research that we've done. But I won't stop. And everybody needs to wake up to this now. And we need paramedics to say, I'm not going to do this. Now, interestingly, in one study, they did look at the paramedics that were very concerned about it. So they just missed that out. We now have paramedic associates coming through. Does everybody know about that? You've got doctors' associates. You've got paramedic associates.
Explain.
They're not full paramedics. So they're just coming in and they're coming in your door and they're just going to do the protocol. We've got protocol over patients. This is what happened in 2020. They had NG191, NG163, NG159 protocols where these patients were getting 5 to 7 times the dose of midazolam along with morphine. You had Matt Hancock, who was the director in his capacity as health secretary as Supply Chain Coordination Limited. He ordered from Accord Healthcare Limited 9.9 million milligrams of midazolam, which would typically last 2 years used in anaesthesia, end-of-life care. They got through it within 9 months. Who was one of the directors of Accord Healthcare Limited? Lord Baranggadia, who sits as court over the Bank of England, who was involved for the cash for favours with David Cameron. These are all the Anglo-Indian alliance. 50% of the global drugs market comes out of India. 75% of the factories don't meet World Health Organization standards. Lord Baranggadia's company, Accord Healthcare Limited, is buying up all the patents. Can you not see it? Sanofi, out of India, makes Respiricase. Now we have Teva Pharmaceuticals, from Israel, is now at 3 sites in the UK, making drugs, giving money to the NHS. They gave 4.5 million, I think it was, to Maidstone Hospital, where Paloma was first treated, against her consent, by the word of Dr. Aranadeo Mohan, who's a lead researcher as well, consultant histopathologist, working with Professor Schofield, who she said he was independent. No, he works with her as well at the Maidstone, but he works at the Marsden as well. This is one big, massive trough. And we are organs for sale. They're coming for the babies. It says it in the documents.
What would you like to be done? Because I believe you're bringing court cases at the moment.
There's an inquest. Paloma lived in Sussex. She was treated in Sussex. She died in Sussex. The job of the coroner is to identify the time, place, cause of death. It must be in the place where she lived and died. As soon as we started asking questions, so the coroner, there's a police inquest opened A police investigation opened the day after they turned the ventilator off. But the coroner orders a standard autopsy. No tissue samples and no toxicology was to be taken. They didn't open her head to prove brain injury. We emailed them, we phoned them, we wanted toxicology of the liver. No tissue samples taken. They never alerted us that we could, they never saved any samples. They never alerted us that we could have a representative there. They've ticked that they have, but they haven't sent us any, and I've asked for it, any proof that they did. So then when we started asking questions, they moved the inquest from Sussex to Kent. Who signed the original death certificate? The death certificate said large cell lymphoma B, precise diagnosis. With what pathology? There was no pathology taken at the autopsy.
So they're faking the documents.
So they wrote this. But there's also no histology from when she was alive that said precise non-Hodgkin's or large cell lymphoma B, because that's not what it said. So there's nowhere that says that. So now I get them to, later they had to remove it. They put the wrong name on the death certificate, so I couldn't become an administrator. It took them 6 months to put the correct name on it. They get rid of the inquest. They didn't tell us. They're supposed to tell us. They kicked the inquest out of Sussex into Kent.
On what grounds?
They said because the last treatment she had was in Kent in 2023. But she had treatment. She had all the fluid drained from around her heart in intensive care. She had treatment by Sussex ambulance crew. She went into intensive care. She was in there for 6 days. They did a procedure on her.
So they've just lied again?
Yes. So then we take it to the Chief Coroner for England, who they lied to her on all 6 points. So Penelope Schofield signed the death certificate that said precise cause of death. Penelope Schofield was in jail in 1997 for perverting the court of justice, the course of justice, for lying for her detective constable boyfriend, who was 5 times over the drink driving limit. He went to jail for 18 months. She went to jail for 3 months. She had her solicitor, her lawyer's licence, suspended for 2 years. She was never struck off. She then is given a...
She wasn't struck off,
No.
but you are, of course.
She was then given a job as a coroner. Then she's given senior coroner. She oversaw the Shoreham air disaster. She's now overseeing Operation Bamba, where 200 deaths were reported as to be because of a surgeon, a neurosurgeon in the hospital. It's now been dropped down to 45, I think, or 42. She's overseeing that. Really? You cannot be a coroner if you've had a custodial sentence. But the council say, but it's spent and we're employing her. Well, hang on a minute. Who is paying her salary? We are. She's paid nearly as much as the Prime Minister.
Despite having perverted the course of justice, and she then
Not
stands
just
in a
nicking
court.
a bottle of wine from Tesco, not nicking a sandwich out of Costa. She lied in court. If you go on and read the case, please Google it and read the case. I'm not sure whether to laugh or cry. He drove the car drunk. He goes into his police station because he's curbed his car and got a puncture. They recognise that he's drunk, so he rings her. She tells them that she was driving the car. She's now a coroner. She's a senior coroner. She's signed a death certificate for something that they've got absolutely no pathology to prove.
So with this inquest, what will be the timescale on it? And are you pursuing
Well,
any further
they've ordered
action?
an inquest for 4 days, even though we haven't put all our witnesses in yet. They're filling the inquest with all of these haematology doctors to say all about cancer. She died of cancer. She's died because this tumour went on her airway and squashed it. Well, where's your evidence of that? Where's your photographs during the autopsy? Where's your measurements? Where's your proof? Why did you not open and show her airway? None of that was done. We've had a pathologist look at the notopsy. We've had her look at the notopsy. And she said that autopsy could never establish a cause of death. So, I've just told the coroner that I am qua advocate. Qua advocate means I have the same legal rights to ask the questions and cross-examine like a barrister and call witnesses. She said, I'm sorry, I can't permit that. So I wrote back to her and said, you don't have the authority to grant or permit. It's my legal right. I will be doing this. So I have asked for this coroner, who signed for no tissue samples, no toxicology, to come to court, to be summoned, to be cross-examined. Oh, she can't do that because she's a member of the judicial. No, they're not judges. They're not judges. They're coroners. They are not above the police. The police shouldn't be sitting on their hands. We've now got evidence in the bundle that Dr. Aranadea Mohan is in contempt of 3 courts. They've got my daughter's statement in there. I've written endless emails to Joe Shiner. I've done full printouts. I've done full analysis. We've done it all. We've gone to the chief constables of 2 forces, Kent and Sussex. We've gone to the We've gone to the police commissioner. We've gone to the IOPC. The Sussex police went to the court in Brighton using the public's money, hired a solicitor to go to the High Court to release the case in the family courts, the High Court of Justice, where my daughter was dragged through. And on the actual document, I don't know how it got sent to me, it says, and any information on Kay Alison Shemirani's anti-vax views that could assist the coroner. I'm sorry,
why would your personal opinions
assist the coroner in my daughter's... The coroner's job is to ascertain the date, time, place and cause of death. What she said was she wanted to understand why Paloma died of a curable disease. Well, hang on a minute. If she had a confirmed diagnosis, which she didn't, their own literature stated 1 in 5 die during the treatment. And we don't go on beyond that. And actually, what the consultant said to Paloma when she did ask her, if I do your treatment, what's my survival at 2, 5, 7, 10 years? And the consultant said, well, it's a new treatment, so we don't have that information.
So when will be this court date? Has it been set?
This kangaroo inquest. Well, it was supposed to be 4 days in July. I'm not sure how she got the 4 days when she doesn't know our witnesses yet. Now, it's going to be another day in August because someone's going on holiday. Well, if they knew about it in April, then they have to submit to me proof that their holiday was booked before that.
Has proof been provided?
I've put that forward because that's a key witness. And now we've been told that there's another day 10 days prior because a particular doctor is leaving the country. Not going on holiday, leaving the country. Are we being told the truth with what they're saying? I cannot permit you to be choir advocate. No, you can't, you're right, because you don't have the authority. So she's telling the truth.
So will you be able to act
I am choir
in court?
advocate. It is my legal right. It's not being able. I am an interested person. I'm next of kin. My ex-husband and I are interested persons and have agreed I will act choir advocate on that in that hearing. It's my right. They can't deny it. This is the problem, you see. People do not understand coronial law. I didn't. And all the way along, we've been gaslighted. We've written so many emails with no response. Joe Shiner doesn't even respond. That's the chief constable. I've written to my MP so many emails. She's never responded to me.
Because of who you are.
I'm a British citizen that pays tax. So it takes it back to the punctum temporis. The punctum temporis. The point in time of the medical cause of my daughter's death was the 19th of July when paramedics and a doctor entered my home and overdosed my daughter with adrenaline, rocuronium, midazolam, fentanyl. More adrenaline, metronidazole. I always say that drug wrong because I wasn't familiar with it. That. And the fact that they didn't give her the antidotes. They didn't drain the fluid from around her heart until I said I would sue them. And they switched the ventilator off. The punctum temporis, the medical cause of death, is the 19th of July in Sussex.
I'm so sorry. I'm
sorry for everybody else that's still here. My daughter, you know I'm a Christian. The Lord decides the hour and the day of our death. She came in the day she did. I was so grateful that she was put inside of me. And she left the day they turned the ventilator off. That's why I never had the date of death on her casket. They ended her life when they turned the ventilator off. Her heart was beating. Her sister got onto the bed. I pulled her over to the side of the bed. I pushed her tongue back in. I pushed her chin up. I put her teddy under her chin so her mouth wouldn't gape. She looked beautiful, and her sister, who's only 19 months younger, got on the bed. And she coddled her, wrapped her arms around her and went to sleep for an hour whilst her body went cold. And we left her in there in peace for privacy. They were best friends. She's where she should be. She was saved. We prayed over her. They removed every single piece of medical paraphernalia from her body before she went to the mortuary. It's not mentioned on the autopsy. They're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to do it. This is death in state custody. This is she couldn't leave because she was on a ventilator with all these drugs. Therefore, she's a deprivation of liberty. She's in state custody. They're not even doing. You don't even report a sudden death at home anymore to the coroner.
Really?
There was a sudden death. There was an incident with a woman recently. One of the undertakers told me he was called out to a body. A lady that had flown in from India or Pakistan to visit her family felt unwell. Called the paramedics, and the paramedics were then working on her for an hour. So she felt unwell. So why didn't they put 2 wide-bore cannulas in? She was Indian or Pakistani. They're very difficult to cannulate. No, they shot her in the leg with an intraosseous gun. And then she died. By the time the undertaker came, he used to work for the coroner. He said, why is she not being... This is a coroner referral. The police went, no, we don't have to do that anymore. The paramedics had gone. The woman's lying on the floor with all her breasts exposed, paddle marks on her chest. Why? The family standing around, frightened, not knowing what to do. 2 young officers. What, the paramedics couldn't even cover her up? Are you kidding me? What is happening to these people?
No dignity.
They shot her in the leg, so she's had adrenaline. Why not a wide-bore cannula if she felt unwell when you arrived? Because this is what's been adopted. God help everybody. And if you're a paramedic watching this, protocols over patients. You are seeing that every time you do it, they're dying. You're seeing it. You're delivering a bag of organs to the hospital. Go check every patient. Go and check that hospital. How were they? Did they survive? Did they survive? The paramedics need to stop it. They need to stop worrying about their mortgage, stop worrying about their bills, just like the nurses that got sacked, the doctors that got struck off, the nurses that got struck off. I'm one of them. I don't care. I'm not killing anyone.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we end?
There's so much. Your body is worth over £1.5 million. We see population replacement theory is not a theory anymore. It's right here, right now. It's happening. All of the births in the UK are from women now. The majority are from women born outside of the United Kingdom. Shortly after my daughter, they tried to pressure her to give up her eggs, and they call it fertility preservation. It was ran in all the press up and down the country that there was a problem with the storage, and a lot of the eggs and the fertility cryothermy had perished. It's interesting that, isn't it? Call me a big fat tin hat conspiracy theorist. If you Google Spermageddon, put it in your Google search, use the devil's tool, you'll see that the fertility around the world is dropping through the floor. It's already reached beyond a critical point in Singapore.
What's causing that?
LED lights. LED lights, you need to get those out of your house. Because blocking the sun. You need the sunshine to make chemicals in your body. You've got 23 aromatic amino acids, the majority of them in the back of the retina. You need that infrared in your eye from the sun.
What about lack of nutrition?
Poor diet. Diet that's nutrient void, that's only grown in potassium, phosphorus and nitrogen. instead of over 42 minerals. So you're getting food comes to the table that's nutrient void. You've got glyphosate, which will chelate the zinc. So you've got plants with no zinc. You need zinc for your mast cells in your lungs. You need it for your brain. You need zinc to inhibit the enzyme that converts your good testosterone to bad testosterone and causes inflammation of the prostate. There's your prostate cancer. You've got so much EMF, so much radiation around the body now. It's frightening. Insects, come on, poisonous, carcinogenic, and they're putting it in food. You've got vaccines with tumorigenic, immortalized cell lines in them. That the longer they're in the body and the more what they call your immunity starts to wane, it's going to become cancerous. You've got modified RNA, which I've already told you. They knew in 1970 they made 70,000 of these. You've got chlorine in your water displacing iodine from your thyroid gland, dropping that. You see an increase in breast cancer in women with low functioning thyroid. It's just endless. Make them sick, keep them sick, treat them, kill them, dispose of them. There's your National Homicide Service. From the cradle to the grave. Now they take it before the cradle. They do it when you're in vitro.
Where can people find you? If they want to
well,
find
I've just been thrown off TikTok, Facebook, faceplant, as my friend calls it, and Instagram. I'm still on Twitter. I'm on Substack. I'm on Telegram, Kate Shemirani, and kateshemirani.com. You can join it for $5.99 a month. Not because I'm a grifter, but I'm like you. If you want the information, you want to learn how to stay healthy and restore your vitality. If you want to do allopathic drugs, fill your boots. It's up to you. If you want to learn how to get healthy naturally, come and join us. If you want to do both, come and join us. But you would go a long way into living a full, long life by paying attention. You are what you eat. Today's food becomes tomorrow's cells. And no amount of exercise and prescription medication is an offset for a poor diet. And they don't win. They don't win. That's why they're all into satanic worship. Because they know the Lord exists. We've already won. It's for us to turn this around now and say no. And we owe it to, I'm sitting here. You're young enough to be my son. This lovely young lady that I could adopt tomorrow, to my left. I am 60 years old in a few months' time. And I had 4 children. Every child's my child, including you and you. If in scripture, if I don't tell you what I know to be true and you die, the blood is on my hands. If I tell you and you still go ahead and do it, then the Lord forgives me. It's not on my hands. So while there's breath in my body, I will continue, because you're all my children as well.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you very much, Kate.
Please come and support us. You need to come and get in that coroner's court. We need as many people there as possible. They're going to make it a media show.
And you're going to be putting this up on Twitter?
They've put so many death threats out. They're trying to make it where we want to do it remote, because I am not going to put myself in harm's way. And I want to be calm. I want to be collected. I want to have the whole bundle in front of me. I want to have everything sorted. I don't want to feel threatened. I don't want to be upset, because I am qua advocate for Paloma Shemirani.
Thank you.
For more exclusive behind-the-scenes content, please be sure to subscribe to our Patreon. It really helps us cover the cost of any live streams, events, protests, or anything that we do. You'll also be seeing any behind-the-scenes footage and anything that we might be doing with Defiance Records.
Resistance GB's new series, 1,000 Words, has me, portrait artist Jake Fern, talking to some of the key figures in the movement. Half my brain concentrating on having a conversation, and the other half on making a painting. Do I succeed at either? You be the judge.